Hi. Hi out there. We're doing another story for the Chronicles. And let me just make something clear here first. This group of stories is particularly for Babushka out there. Hi, sweetie. I love you. I know you're going through a time right now that's not really fun in your life. You're making some important decisions and switching jobs. And I just wanted to let you know everything will be okay. You're a very wise girl, and you're going to figure it out. It'll all work out great. And hello out there to Tombo, too. That's Babushka's husband. I'm so glad you got your birthday package, and I'm so glad you like it. So, this is the story, the beginning story about the mothers. And this concerns Babushka. Honey, I feel that it's extremely important that you know the family history of your grandma Sarah here. This is the woman I named you after, and you ended up deciding to change your name to Isabella, like mine, and that's great. You know, you're beautiful. I can understand why you decided to do that. But I did name you after the most wonderful woman I knew in my life. And her story is very off the wall and very different. And unfortunately, it had a tragic end. She faced, in the latter time of her life, a lot of abuse. And I'm not going to mince words here. There's other folks out there, one in particular, who's watching this video that just connected to me, who remembers when the end time came, when all this went down in 1988. And, but that person doesn't realize a lot of things about her history I had locked away in me. And a lot of the conditions around us I had locked away in me too. So for years and years, an educator and a counselor told me I had suffered from PTSD because of this. And also because of my father's side of the family, her husband, because of a lot of the shiza and dog-eat-dog competition and dirty deeds that went on in the community that I lived in as a child. It really affected me. And no amount of real cognitive therapy would have helped me. And I remember once when I was a teenager, they wanted to put me on medication. And looking back, I'm really thankful I didn't take that road. I had other mentors that kind of helped me along the way. In particular, 2 youth pastors and their wives who were wonderful. So, let's get into this. So, it's kind of hard to look back on all this. But Sarah, when I think of the song by Fleetwood Mac, Sarah, it reminds me of her. She truly was the poet in my heart, Babushka, and I'll tell you why. Number one thing I want to mention too let's get this out of the way. I've talked to you about it on the phone and in text, but about 10 years ago, actually, for years and years and years, I was always curious and wanting to know about her DNA from her father's side, because she was treated a little bit differently. You know, she was born Caucasian, fine, but when I show this photo and other photos of her to a lot of my friends who are Mexican or Asian or African American, they're like, there's a little something something to her. And I'm like, yeah, she had a little bit of flavor. And that was one of the reasons why my dad, Babushka, your grandfather, fell for a hook, line, and sinker. So we were always told that that side of the family, the Ozians, which means ocean, that they came from Spain, that they changed their name, didn't change their faith, but they fled from one point to one point because of their faith and maybe a few other things. I don't know. But I did my DNA about 5 years ago, and I was stunned. I was like, how could that be? I was floored. And it was great, because that side of the family, and in the future, Babushka, if you want to continue on with this and do more detail to find out for yourself, that's totally cool with me. Go for it. And if you need help financially in doing this, I'll help you out. No problem. Just let me know. When I did the DNA, it stretches not only into Eastern Europe, but all the way over into the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire, today, we consider it Turkey. Answered a lot of questions. And I mentioned it as a joke to one of my co-workers, this older guy who's from France. As soon as I found out one day, just joking around about it, and he looked at me and he said, "Assalamu alaikum." I thought about it for a second, and I thought, oh, okay. Explains a lot. And Babushka, you know what that means? It's a great thing. A lot of people don't think it's a great thing, but it is truly a wonderful thing. After discovering all that, I decided, oh, who cares? Because I've been studying the scientific genealogy of all humanity and breaking all that down, because we're all connected and it all comes from Africa. And then we traveled a ton of years ago. So I just thought I'd get that out there and let you know, because Babushka, you can go back on these tapes whenever you want, and you can take things in small increments if you want to, whatever you want to do, and replay it or whatever. Whenever you want, however you want, these are for you. So let's go back to Sarah. She was born in late October of 1941 at Fort Lewis Hospital, which is now a museum. It's a military base in Washington State. She was a minute older, maybe a minute and a half, than her twin brother Sasha. And if Sasha's granddaughter, who also goes by Sasha, if you're out there and you're curious about watching this, you're welcome to. I think it's important for you to know this stuff too. But Grandpa was so excited about the twins being born. He wanted to name them after a cocktail that they were drinking in celebration. He wanted to name them Tom and Jerry. Now, Grandma, his wife, she wanted nothing to do with that. She thought it was funny. Has nothing to do with the cartoon. But she's a Taurus and she would have none of it. And so we just stuck with that. So we have her. And there were peculiar things about her and her brother. Number one, they didn't grow any hair on their head till they were about 3 or 4. Kind of an odd thing. Their dad was the same way. And some of his siblings. When she was 4 years old, she moved with Grandma and her twin brother over to Hamburg, Germany, where Grandpa was working. And she lived in a state of fear, but also in a state of joy on a military base, and met many friends, many different kinds of people, and got to know some of the relatives over there. Military brats, yeah, that's a bad term, military brats. Children from military families have it a little bit different, especially back then. It happened a little bit during World War I, but not as much. It was a big thing during World War II. So you have all these kids from different folks, different walks of life, different class layers, different nationalities, and they all become one because they're there and they know each other. They don't know anybody else. And also, the military base was fresh and new, and it wasn't structured. They were building on that structure back then. But not only did she become integrated with the other children, but she also became integrated with German society. She learned how to roller skate over there on cobblestone streets with all the bumps. And she remembers staring down at the ground, going over all those bumps. And she was surrounded by all these buildings that had been torn down from explosions. And they still had scars of the burn marks and the charring. Very surreal. But all she could do was look down on the ground and concentrate on her roller skates, making it over the bumps. And she had some dolls, and I'll show you. These were 2 of her favorite. They're little German dolls. And I think, honey, you remember these being in my china cabinet. So, these are 2 of her German dolls. And then another one that she played with. There's some other ones, different kinds. But this was one of her favorites that she used to play with as a kid. So, she grew up a little bit differently. She lived there for about 5 years. When they came back to the United States, it doesn't matter what base that was at. What matters is when she came back, her and her brother, they had been so integrated in being German, they couldn't speak English. They had lost it. So from 4 to 9, which is a crucial time for children to develop, they had lost the language from their little kidhood, and it developed into something else. And they had a hard time adjusting back in the United States. She said one of her memories was going to school, and one of the first days, the kids ganged up on her and her brother, and they had to run home. The kids were throwing rocks at them and dirt clods, calling them dirty krauts. And they had to deal with it. Her mom and dad helped them with readjusting and learning English again. The schools back then were not structured, especially with children who may be immigrants or this or that, a little bit different, to learn English. So she had a hard time with that, but she made it. And at the same time, her parents really instilled in her music. She learned at a young age how to play the piano very well and dance. She also later on learned how to play the clarinet. Eventually, as the years go by, when she's approaching high school, the family gets stationed again over in Japan on the island of Okinawa, and she went to high school there. A wonderful time for her. But it was also a dangerous time because of Hiroshima, the threat of nuclear attack, and then being surrounded by the pain and suffering, around that area, and then talking to her friends and classmates, and also other Japanese kids that she met over there. She was learning on her own a little bit of Japanese. So she became a little multilingual. Imagine that. But she wanted to learn those things. She enjoyed that, and she enjoyed memorization games, things like that. She was very good at playing cards. She actually showed me one day, after buying me the Ouija board, which she also bought for your Aunt Jewel when she was little. She told me how you can do the tarot with regular playing cards. And she was so good at playing bridge and poker. She taught poker to my two brothers so that they could go have games with their friends and not feel left out and not knowing all the tricks. But she knew them all. She was just smart as a tack when it came to those things. So in high school on Okinawa, she met a young man as young as the age of 14. She was briefly engaged, and he was another military kid, and he was biracial. He was half Japanese and half white, and they had some romance. Both parents, his parents, her parents, they were cool with it. They thought, oh, they'll have beautiful children, But they did warn them both that once they come back to the States, they might bump into trouble. But her and her group of friends and him, they didn't think none of it because they didn't understand what was going on at the time in the United States. The change, the beginnings of the fights for segregation in the country, especially in parts of the South. Well, eventually she broke the engagement, and she wanted to be able to dance with all the guys, not just him. And he was a little bit possessive, and she had to put her foot down. And maybe that was a good decision, I don't know, but it was hers. And she said it was a good experience and a life lesson. So it's around 1955. They get restationed back home. Good timing, too, because her dad was starting to lose it. They end up at the military base in Little Rock, Arkansas, 1955. Mom had no clue at all about that environment. She was a good kid. She wanted to make friends. She made friends with the group of friends she was used to. So at the school and around the town, her and her brother did some things that in that society you just don't do. She had some black girlfriends and white girlfriends and Latina, whatever, who cares? But she was drinking out of the wrong water fountain, walking the wrong side of the street, dancing with the wrong kids, and going to the wrong hangouts. What a rebel. Then one day, she's getting out of school with her friends, this group of girls, and there's a bunch of upheaval right outside the school on the property. People carrying signs and screaming. Cops were there. Hoses and dogs. Screaming and yelling everywhere. What a shocker. But her friends knew what was going on. And in that moment, a white lady approaches them, is in all their faces, screaming her head off with profanity and a bunch of just crap. She sticks her finger in Mom's face and calls her the N-word too. And Mom was like, oh my God. Friends help her, and she helps them get away from all of that and get home. Then when her dad comes home, after telling her mom, her dad comes home, and her mom's a Taurus, by the way, they tell him what went down. Her dad's outraged. He arranges a meeting with some of his superiors, talks to some of his buddies, and he ends up getting the whole family restationed away from all of that to Fountain, Colorado. So I don't think he realized too the reality of the situation till it happened. So in Fountain, Colorado, she has a great time, and she goes to a lot of dances, a lot of military family gatherings too. And they were all, her folks are from a working class and farming background, and they had to pinch their pennies. But Grandpa's around a lot of the upper military, the upper echelon, a lot of those men. They had scholarships and they had money from their family to put them through military school, and then that way they'd have that higher rank. Well, Grandpa had to earn his. But in these gatherings, you have to kind of show a little something something. And Mom had some teaching from other women on how to be a little bit of a debutante. At high school, she was considered, back in the 50s, what you would call a cool cat. But Grandma would make sure that her and her brother would fit in. And she'd sew a lot. She could sew anything and make it beautiful. So this is one of Grandma's dresses here. I think you remember this. I actually wore it a couple of times in the 80s when I would go out dancing and go to parties. It's a beautiful piece of work. And someday, Babushka, you'll have it. You know, it's small because she had a very tiny waist. She had like a 22-inch waist back then. But you can cut it up or give it away to somebody who might value it. Make it into something, piece of art, whatever you want to do. It's going to be yours. It's one of many dresses, by the way, that I've kept. So, she has a great time in high school and lots of fun stuff. But as she's graduating, it kind of dawns on her. Being a military kid and traveling is all fun and dandy, but she wants stability in her life, and that's a lot of the end game for these young people who travel all over the world. They have really wonderful experiences, but they feel like they're not grounded. That's always one thing that she told me before she died. It was always in the back of her mind that she wanted stability. And she ends up getting some of that after her dad retired. They end up moving over to Calabasas, Oregon, and her folks buy the property of Moonshine Hollow. And Mom is working, working class job in a factory, and then also preparing to go to school. She wants to help take care of children and teach. That's her goal. But she fell in love, like I said in a last video, with a guy, an older man, who's in the military, and they become promised or whatever, engaged, so to speak, without the ring. But she's thinking they're going to get married. And she falls for him hook, line, and sinker, and she gets pregnant. When she tells him about it, she finds out he's married and possibly has another child of his own, and that really broke her heart. But her parents, they're like, stay with us. You can keep going to school and we'll help you. And she has your Aunt Jewel. So she's continuing to work and go to school and get her education. She's about a year in. Then one day, on the way to school, it's a real snowy day. It's very cold. There's only one main road that goes into Salem, Oregon, to the community college she was going to. And it's dark. It's just right at dawn. And the skies are gray and just full of white everywhere. It was hard to see. And she slides into a ditch. And she's stuck. She gets out. She's got heels on and a dress. And she doesn't know what to do. Back then there were no cell phones. There was no pay phone within miles and miles and miles. And she's waving down people to stop and help her. People just drive on by. But she keeps trying. She doesn't see a lot of cars. She's just pining, wondering to do, starting to panic. And then all of a sudden, a car slows down. And there's a guy in there. And he gets out and he offers to help. Well, one thing that really got her, and it was almost love at first sight, if not an a total infatuation. The guy gets out and she sees he's wearing braces and he has a set of wooden canes. And he's older than her, she can see that. But to her, he looked a little like Elvis, very dapper and sharp, very friendly. He introduces himself, hi, my name's John, I'll help you out. And he is immediately besotted by her. Just wonderful. So in the snow, he doesn't even have his jacket on. He proceeds to get into his car and pull out a set of chains to hook up both cars, all with his canes and braces. And she helps him out too, and they engage in conversation. And as the conversation continues on, they realize that they go to the same school, and they share. And then he pulls her out of the ditch. What a wonderful thing. And then she follows him carefully, and they drive slowly into Salem, Oregon, park their cars together, and proceed to go to their classes. And that's how she met my dad. I think that's a beautiful thing. She gets to know him more, gets to know his hometown of Humbleton, tiny and beautiful, with a rodeo, beautiful houses, beautiful fields, gets to know his granddad who's living with him, and feels welcome. And she's thinking, this is a beautiful thing. And at the same time, he's falling in love with her. And despite everything, despite her religion and whatnot, she's not a religious person. She always told me, the best thing is to be a good human being. Just be a good human being. As long as you don't want to intentionally hurt anybody, just be you. But he was raised what I would call fundamentalist Catholic. Oh, and as we're talking on the subject here, I want to bring out some magic in case other people might watch this video, because this is my story from my youth. I might bring up some stuff that's going to piss people off. And you know what? I care less, because I got this. And I also have another magical word. See if I can find it. It's actually a word I designed using some Roman type. This is a magical word for you, Babushka. So in the future, if you have any questions, you want to text or talk to me, whatever you want to do, keep this word in mind. But going back, they get to know each other, and he proposes. And he presents her with an antique engagement ring that belonged to his grandmother who raised him, Isabella. And she's besotted and floored and excited. And her daughter at the time, Jewel, my sister, is about 3 years old. And Dad wants a whole family. And he's like, we'll get the adoption papers ready. And then that way, when we do get hitched, we're not going to worry about a church. Because, you don't have to convert to Catholicism. It's okay. Let's get hitched now. Because they waited. They waited to be intimate until after the wedding. But he's like, we'll get everything arranged. It's going to be a beautiful thing. So Mom did. And she thought with all her heart it would be a wonderful thing. And as she was finishing her degree in early childhood education, he didn't finish his degree. As soon as there was a job set up with stability, he ended up working for the state, for Marion County, as a draftsman. He wanted those benefits. He wanted them to go to her and Jewel. And they wanted to have more children. They had all these plans. But she wanted to specialize with children with disabilities and special needs. And she eventually got a job in a bigger town, actually the town I was born in, which is 8 miles from Humbleton. Ironically, it's the town also of one of the worst presidents of the United States during the Great Depression, and my dad would never shut up about it, but that's their only claim to fame. That's another story. But eventually she taught at a public school in that town, and she specialized in helping the teachers. She was a teacher's aide, and a lot of the kids had disabilities. Her husband, my dad, was a member of the Paralyzed Veterans of America, even though he wasn't injured in any military duty. He got the post-polio syndrome when he was 32, after he had served. He was still considered a member of that group with all the benefits that went with it. And Mom engaged in all of that. She became a member of the auxiliary for the Paralyzed Veterans of America. And then she went out of her way. I know this for a fact when I was little, because she would tell me. And then I met other kids later on when I was a teenager. Not only did she help out with a little bit of her extra time, what she could put in with kids with special needs, but also at that public school, there were some kids who were from Mexico who had a hard time with learning English. And she looked back on how she went through all of that when she was little. And she would set aside time for the kid or children to see her during recess or after school or even before school, even if it was just a little time during the day. 10-15 minutes made a big difference. And she would help them improve their English skills. Because she told me around 1987, when I started asking her about all this stuff, she's like, I don't want them, or I didn't want them, to go through the hell I went through. And that says a lot. What a wonderful, wonderful lady. So, I don't want to get off on a tangent here, and this might actually turn into a 3-parter. But if you folks enjoy this, you like it, just remember to ring the bell. Bye.